I'm happy we have the opportunity to come together. And today there is Ida Oberman, but before she starts, there are some organizational and technical things to talk about. Then I'd ask Laura just to tell us something what's concerning the organization and technical things.
Yes, thank you, Joost. Also from my side, a warm welcome to all. It's wonderful that so many of you are able to join today's lecture. So just to share a few organizational details with you. Yes, so we will be recording all of the lectures and we will upload them to our YouTube channel as well as our website afterwards. But here we kindly ask you for a little patience, but we will try to have the upload completed latest by the reminder that you receive each Monday from us. And then it would be really great if during the lecture you could make sure that your microphones are muted. And after the lecture, there will be another discussion round. And yeah, it would be great if you could put all your questions into the chat and then Joost will read the question out loud. And then of course you can unmute yourself again to communicate in case. And yes, also, I will now insert the link to the certificate of attendance into the chat box so you can download it. And the certificate will be available at least half an hour after the lecture has taken place. So you might have a look right now. I hope this works. And yes, I actually think that this is it from my side. So if you have any further questions, please always feel free to reach out to us via icw@alanus.edu. And with this in mind, I wish you a wonderful 1.5 hours with us. And I look forward to your lecture, Ida. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And maybe if you like, you know, it's for everyone, it's free to join and you can also select lectures and topics you are interested in. So if you just spread the website International Campus Waldorf to all the people you know from your school, from your teacher training center or wherever you are, just make it known that this is possible to join. We would be happy if you can support this initiative by that. So now I'm very much pleased and happy to have my dear friend and colleague Ida Oberman, Dr. Ida Oberman, with us. She is from California, Oakland. Originally, she is from the Netherlands, as Christophe from last time. And then she has been a Waldorf student in Tübingen, Germany. And then she moved to the US and had her training, educational training and her academic training there. And she received a PhD from the Stanford University. And that was already a study about Waldorf education, a brilliant study, which is very prominent in academic Waldorf circles. And then right now, she is the founder and director of the Community School for Creative Education in Oakland, California. And I have been to that school several times. And I have to say, whoever has the opportunity to go to California, just go to that place because it's such a warm atmosphere and such a special school. I'm really touched every time I visit that school and see this special initiative. And I think Ida is talking about that project too a bit. She is furthermore the program director or organizer of the Teacher Training Center at Mills College in Oakland. And this is an area where we also work together. So I'm very happy to have you here, Ida, tonight. And yeah, please start with your lecture.
Thank you very much, Joost. Thank you, Laura. Thank you all. It's such a joy to be together. Can you hear me? Is the audio good? Wonderful. First, a little bit of a personal word, and then we go to take a a journey through some slides that I've prepared to then dedicate it to conversation. Thank you very much, Joost, for your introductions and the thumbnail of the biography. I want to proudly add that I was trained in scholarly research at Stanford University. I was trained as a Waldorf teacher in Stuttgart, and very happy that I was able to do that. We always say that Harvard is the Stuttgart of general education, and Stanford does the same. And we were very proud that I could attend Stuttgart Lehrerseminar. I would like to share a little bit more of a vignette of my biography, in that I was born and grew up in the Netherlands, and then at the age of 9 came to Germany. And an important part of my biography there is that my family is Jewish, and those of us who remember will know that for somebody who was growing up in the early 60s, that was a very important experience as a Dutch young girl, that Holland had been under the occupation, and both sides of my family had been very active in the resistance, as well as in part victim. My great-grandmother was murdered in the Holocaust. So that really shaped a lot of when I thought about Germans, because I thought of them when I was little as little, medium-sized, and big Nazis, and that embodied all that was ill and dangerous. And I want to set that at the beginning, because it really has so much to do with thinking about experiences of deep injustice and inequities, and how to move through that and beyond that to build a better world. With this, I would like to invite my colleague to launch the PowerPoint. So my introduction, I just shared a bit. I want to just add that when we came to Tübingen and I was 9, it was because my parents were asking where to send children who do not know a word of German, that by chance we were enrolled in the Waldorf school, learning that they would be a little bit more patient with non-native German speakers, since my siblings and I and my parents only spoke Dutch. So out of that came that really by dint of circumstance, we were enrolled in the Waldorf school, and then I stayed till my 13th year. And that is an anchor in my story. Next slide, please. So our topic is a very current one. It's a gripping one. It's deconstructing institutional racism. And what we mean by institutional racism is those structures and systems that prolong and exacerbate racism, so inequities that are already activated by individuals, but because they have impact in institutions, exceed the individual action and are perpetuated through institutions, even if the individual is adjusting their actions. So that is the lens of deconstructing institutional racism. We are now going to think about that challenge. We're going to think about how it is accelerating rather than softening, the problem, the task, and the stakes. And with that frame, which is a global frame, I venture to say, I'm honored and humbled and want to hear from others, since we are here in a global community on Zoom. But from my perch, it's a global frame. And it is particularly sharp in the United States. And in the United States, it's particularly sharp in California, where there's the highest distance of wealth and lack of wealth, and in Oakland, the home city of our school, where in all of California, in all of the America, there is one of the cities with the highest distance between the highest earners and the lowest earners, and also between racial groups. So you can imagine on this mid-sized city, all that is at play and in play that really projects the critical challenges of our time. So we're going to think about the problem, the task, and the stakes, and then, only then, we start thinking about Waldorf education. Then to think, after reflecting 100 years, and then also more recently, we're going to share about the Community School for Creative Education. We want to really end up thinking about the task before us, next steps. Might it be true, and that is our hypothesis here, that leading for equity, leading for dismantling institutional racism is a Waldorf calling, in deep alignment, in deep origin commitment to its founding moment. That is the task for us today. I hope you are okay with it. I will speak for about 20 minutes and then have some question and answer, and then we will delve into a deeper discourse. Next slide, please. So where we are today in the United States, a date that is on everybody's lips is the passage of something called Brown versus Board of Education. It was 1954, and it said by law that the segregation of children by race in educational settings of public schools was no longer legal. That was 1954. We are now 2021. We are more segregated. We are more racially segregated today than we were then. And the news is even sharper. In just this year, 2 months ago, a very important study was published, Roots of Structural Racism Project. And it found that in the last 20 years, since 1991 to today, 83% of communities are further segregated than they were at the time of check 20 years ago. And we know by smaller studies that the acceleration of segregation, racial segregation, is increasing as we speak. So this is not just past, this is not just recent past, this is present, and if we do not act, it will project future. So what is the problem there? We want to think, it was just this week, of course, it was last Saturday, so 10 days ago, that we all remembered 20 years since 9/11, the terrorist attack that so shook first New York, then this country, and then, also because of reactions, the world. Where do we stand now versus 9/11? If we read the newspaper editorials, time and time again, the confirmation is made that that was a turning point mark, and since then, certainly the United States has become increasingly, and the term is used, tribal, that we are divided up. We are not only divided up politically, we are divided up by how we think about health. We are divided up how we think about environment. We are divided up in how we think about building community together and who is community. So we're sharpened in our distances. Now with this further acceleration of distances, we are also finding that overall, those who are more isolated profit less. And interestingly enough, that is not only true for those who are of fewer means, it is true also for those who have more means, because we know that in our community, if we look at the blue chip companies, what they are looking for to hire somebody in the increasingly global economy, in our knowledge economy, in our spanning the country's economy, is somebody who is multiculturally fluent, who is interculturally fluent, because even the bottom line is impacted if somebody cannot strike a deal, no romance, no idealism, just the dollar, if somebody cannot strike a deal with somebody across the table who has another skin color, who speaks another language, who has another faith. Very important. So also those who are of higher wealth and are increasingly isolated lose. We're starting to speak about, it's a wonderful term, there's not just the ghetto of poverty, and ghetto is such a beautiful word. We remember that word comes from this island of Ghetto off the coast of Florence in Italy in the Middle Ages, where all the Jews of Florence were banned to ghetto, and nobody was able to come and go from that. That was the first ghetto where you isolated somebody. And we now not only speak of ghettos of poverty, we speak of ghettos of wealth. That also there is an impairment of the building of knowledge, the building of awareness, the building of ability to interact and negotiate and build together with people from another context. So the increased isolation is a problem for everybody. The blue chip companies will look for how well you can negotiate with somebody from another language before you even, that was an Economist article 2 years ago, before you even show how good you were in math and science, which used to be always, you need to be good at math and science and writing to get a good job. That has shifted. So everybody loses if we cannot work across borders and lines. One would think if that is so, everybody loses across blue chip companies. Thank you for the question. Blue chip companies are the ones that are the higher value on the stock market. So the global companies, for example, Exxon and Shell and McKinsey. Exxon, Shell, and Phillips. So realizing that those are the companies that want to have global trade and global profit. So if that is important, one would think that we are all with our eye to becoming more global, becoming more interactive, learning more languages, learning respect and knowledge and relationship of different religions, and the trend is exactly the inverse. We are becoming more isolated. We're becoming more isolated, not just in terms of the points that I just described, but it goes deep inside. It's not just that the structures mean that we live in different communities geographically. In the United States, we're seeing that people move even by zip code to people who think alike in terms of politics, and then in terms of epidemiology and in terms of environment, but that also means it affects who you marry and it affects who you hire. So you see there is a domino effect that as we become more segregated in with whom we go to school and who is our neighbor, that we start really having, and this is our topic, structural inequalities, that the people who live in one place will hire from people who look like them, think like them, believe like them, and will not hire the others. So the structural inequalities are built out of these critical trends. That is the problem, and the problem has a Janus side. Janus, it has two sides. One is the structural systems that build inequalities. Very important, and this is so shown in recent research, also in our Roots of Structural Racism study of just this year, 2021, is that it has an epistemological side. It has a side that is an emotional side, a thinking side, and a doing side. We know from our cognitive research, our brain research, we know now that the brain is malleable. That has been such an important insight. Rudolf Steiner knew it without having MRIs, but now the scientific world knows it. And what that means is that our brain, which is malleable and is vibrant and is growing every minute, the little child's brain, research shows, bends to empathy. The little child's brain bends to empathy. I'm still here on the problem. It bends to empathy, and then it sorts. The child's brain sorts who belongs, who do I trust? With whom can I be a member? With whom can I be together? With whom do I belong? And the child's brain, interestingly, the research has shown those that they are with are the ones that say, those are the ones with whom I belong. It can be quite random. It doesn't have to be that they're all the same skin color, that they're all the same color hair. It's who they experience being together with when they are very little. With whom do I belong? With whom together do I experience membership? With whom do I feel safe? And out of that comes how we then choose who we hang out with, who we marry, who we go to school with, who we want to be neighbor with, who we want to hire, for whom we want to work, with whom we want to build a tomorrow. So the epistemological, the early childhood experiential foundation lays the bedrock for the building of these instructional institutions. This is so important because often when we hear the discourse about dismantling institutional racism, we think it's about admissions tests to this place. It's about who gets interviewed, who gets hired, who gets promoted, looking outward. And we now in our conversation are saying there's a Janus face to it. We must also look inward. And I think you're starting to anticipate how this is going to come to education and Waldorf. But before we make that pivot, I want to make two important points. One, the task is tremendously urgent because of the numbers that we just discussed. If we do not come together, we already know that our world is at stake, our health is at stake, our ability to collaborate around health and growth of our global community is at stake. So the cost of failure is never as clear as it is today. And now next slide, please. So let us take a breath. I can't see the chat. Before we pivot to Waldorf education, are there some clarifying questions, Laura, that I should, or Joost, that I should address now?
No, not right now. There are no questions right now.
Thank you.
But maybe wait a minute or so. Someone can ask a question.
Thank you. And I will please keep the questions coming, and I will also put the Roots of Structural Racism project link in the chat. So now let us take a breath, because in ways this challenge and this crisis is not without precedent. If we think 100 years ago, there was a critical time that we can say the cost of not acting is great. The urgency is now. The world is coming out of its foundations. And that would be in the immediate wake of the Great War. And what we saw there in the founding of the first school, it's so interesting. This was an effort, we've not commonly referred to it, but this was an effort to dismantle institutional inequities. At the time in Stuttgart, in Europe, the question on the lips of all was, first and foremost, socioeconomic. secondly, educational, and thirdly, gender. But the focus was dismantling institutional structural inequities. And what did Dr. Steiner do? If we look at the institution that was launched and remind us that at the time it was considered by many an experiment, who knew that this would last the test of time for now 102 years? This bold experiment was to dismantle gender inequities, to dismantle socioeconomic inequities, and to dismantle the predictive power of academic background of your families. Because now in this school, the children of the worker and the children of the factory owners sat side by side, not just for a summer course, not just for a course, a Saturday afternoon, not even just for one class, but actually for the duration of their educational experience. So it was just this, it was experiencing being together over time as one community. Remember that key point of offering the experience of membership, offering the experience of belonging together, of offering the experience of learning together. So that was one point. The next point was the educational levels, that those who came from highly educated backgrounds and those who were the children of the workers of the Waldorf Astoria factory were sitting side by side. And it was not asked whether, it was not sorted by whether you were college bound, quote unquote, university bound, or whether you were going to only do 9 grades. Very important. And last not least, remarkably, that girls and boys were together, and that the boys learned to knit and the girls learned Feldmessen, they learned how to measure the lands, and everybody did word work and everybody did science. Underneath that, and it's a beautiful point that Joost has made a number of occasions, as well as Christophe, the beautiful inclusiveness that the subjects themselves were not ranked. There was no structural inequity among the subjects. The content learned that even there, that the world was inclusive, is inclusive, that the world is not this matters and that does not matter, but the stitch in the knitting of a scarf is as important as drawing the great geometric shape that will otherwise lead you to compete for college entrance. So the subjects are equal, but around that is so important that the structural equity of sex and gender and socioeconomics. But already in the founding, this Janus phase, it was not just everybody gets to be part of it, everybody gets to learn together, everybody has a future together, but there were very deep experiential features built in so that the child, the malleable brain of the child, could start to grow in trust of inclusive membership, to grow in trust that we all matter together and that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. And 3 beautiful examples for that are, first of all, the 2 signature features of the Waldorf curriculum. One very important one is world language, that Dr. Steiner knew to say that world language, one language other than German, should be taught from 1st grade on. That language other than German should be taught from 1st grade on. We now know that the empathetic brain grows when they learn to love the sound of different languages, and that the empathetic brain grows when it learns to love, to respect the speaker of the other language as you are my other me. You are part of me and I am part of you and I will learn from you. So the critical development of the awareness that an other language is an enrichment rather than an alien, that is brought in right there at the beginning in 1st grade. The other is the festivals. The Roots of Structural Racism projects lifts up, as a couple of other studies did, how important it is, if we really want to bring this experience of belonging rather than othering to our broader world, that peoples also learn to respect each other's religious experiences there, and that a possibility is to find ways that groups of people can learn to honor and co-celebrate the religious rituals of different groups. How important that is for our future. That is put out there now. That is a key way to deconstruct institutional racism. How much is that already built in from 1919 on in the festivals that come from many different traditions, where children learn not only to honor their festival and have it be part of their schooling experience, but then also learn to experience the festivals of other traditions and learn to celebrate those not as one I necessarily do at home, but as one that I see that people I care about, people I learn about, people that I do art with and I do art about, that those are also very honored. Those are sacred traditions. So that experience of the festivals that we're now saying is such an important way to bring our pained world back into unity is something that from 1919 on was already seen as a critical linchpin to building a common better world, deconstructing institutional inequities. And last not least, as I already mentioned, so key that everybody is together, and everybody is together not only learning together, but also building together, building in third grade houses together, every grade a theater piece together, every morning a song together, and every day through the years a community together. Harnessing Waldorf to deconstruct institutional inequities, whatever the foremost one is, and now I propose racism. So there's a powerful promise there. And once we've thought about the powerful promise and the powerful precedent, we are going to gird our loins and pay attention to the powerful problems and our task moving forward. But if we think about the powerful promise, I want to lift up a few. I want to lift up 5. Such a moving one, and I'm so grateful to classmates of mine in Tübingen when I was growing up telling me, because at the time the memory was still so alive, this was in the 60s, and they remembered that their grandparents told the story of the building of the first Goetheanum. And I remember my friend Eckhard Reichle telling me, and he was a big talker, so I was not sure it was true, and then I learned it was so, telling me how his grandmother had told him that as people from all reaches of Europe came together to work in that year of 1920, on the building of the first Goetheanum, there were people from France, there were people from Germany, there were people from England, people from Holland. Mind you, that kind of a gathering, building something together, as we could hear the bombs fall, it was an earshot, would be much like if we all came together, people who were great Trump supporters, people who were avid Democrats, people who were non-maskers and people who were maskers, people who were climate deniers and people who promoted climate care, that from all those reaches, people would come together to build a Goetheanum together. That is remarkable. And so it was. The second point is that very next year, and we just celebrated it, I was so happy to receive a copy, there was the issuance of the first copy of Das Goetheanum, boldly called Internationale, not just any old, not Deutsche, Internationale Wochenschrift, International Weekly für Anthroposophische und Anthroposophie und Dreigliederung. The vision that this was an international effort. It was not a local effort. It was not promoting my people. This was an international vision from the start. And then if we think about the foundings, that is also remarkable. As the world was shrinking in its economic stress and strain, thinking which countries are taking away from Germany in terms of building up a badgered economy. But here there were groups that were going out and starting a Waldorf school in The Hague, which, remember, was not a big supporter of Germany just 3 years ago under the Great War. And then Michael Hall outside of London, when England and Germany were fighting. And finally, very finally, New York City, when it was the entrance of the United States into the war, fighting Germany and Austria, that led to the defeat of what was previously the Great Empire. So incredible example of not just boundary crosser, but boundary bridger. Because this is not just people who went and said, let's do a conference together. This was not just people who said, let's go and be friends together. This was a people who said, let us go and build schools together, and then build kindergartens together, and let's build preschools together, and let's build community gardens together. This was an initiative to actually build back better together, to deepen the experience that we are members together of building forward, deconstructing institutional inequities. Next slide, please. So if we see this cupola, this is the first Goetheanum. It is a remarkable mark of this spanning the differences and the distances. Next slide, please. I want to now pivot to the challenges and make it actually a very personal story, and the incredible gains and wins. It is my personal story. I'm very honored here to acknowledge my class teacher, Hannah Lindenberg, who you see here on the right as she was my teacher from 3rd grade on, and this is when I was an adult just deciding to come to America to start a Waldorf school. And here on the left, it is her with both of them now passed, her late husband, Christophe Lindenberg, known to many as the great historian, also historian of Waldorf education, great historian also of Dr. Steiner's biography, and great thinker about Waldorf education, and particularly the teaching of history in Waldorf education. So these are important personal memories of mine, and very much my guides, and I dedicated my dissertation to both of them. And out of that, I want to turn to a very personal story. But in terms of confronting the possible problems after enjoying and celebrating this journey walk of Waldorf education, so predicting, anticipating, and laying foundations 102 years ago to do the task that is on everybody's lips now, which is dismantling institutional racism. But before I go on, again, I'll pause. There is a question. I think the question from Ms. Joy de Berger might be best kept till afterwards, Joy, if it's okay, because that's such a good conversation piece. I'll now speak to clarifying questions. So now we go from the the joys and the promise and the task to our learning journey. And this is a very personal piece for me. 1 second. There's a question, could we say something about those who question the concept of institutional systemic racism? I'm thinking of people like this, Thomas Sowell. Alongside this, or so it seems to me, is the tragedy that pushes attempts to address embedded racism into the political left and opponents such as Sowell to the I think the question is about the sets of a dichotomy far from your Goethean picture. Good. May we get there? Let me finish the arc of the argument, and then this is a beautiful point, Kevin, that we will return to when we discuss. Thank you for asking that. Next slide, please. Before we go into the story of the community school, my personal journey, and it has to do, actually, it touches on Kevin's question. And maybe we can all just sit, adjust our seat, get comfortable. I want to tell a very personal thing that I've actually never told in a global Zoom community, but I want to share now, because the work we are doing together, and we need each other to do well, and we need all of us to do well, is of such crucial essence. And it is this: I was not alone thinking in the 60s about where people stood on National Socialism. If you were not German, certainly it was on your mind all the time. Were you a good German or a bad German? And probably, and I can ask my peers who are Germans, that in your hearts also was, where did my parents stand? Where did my grandparents stand? So I'm just, and we know the beautiful book, Nasty Girl, Das unanständige Mädchen, which really lifted that up, of finding out where did people stand, and always quickly with the thought, what judgment can I pass on them? And where do I stand now? So in my heart, and I shared with you already that part of my family is Jewish, that my families on both sides were very active in the resistance, and that tragically we lost family that we were trying to hide because hiding places were found out, and that my great-grandmother was murdered in Treblinka, even though she was 87, but she was still put on a transport and deported and killed. And my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side actually hid 2 young Jewish men in the attic who both were actually able to speak at both of my grandparents' funerals. So an Anna Frank story with a happy ending. I say that to say that that was on my mind when I came to Germany. Is I feel very unsafe. I don't know if my siblings are safe. I don't know if my parents are safe. I feel very unsafe. I didn't want to learn German. I didn't even want the words in my mouth. I didn't want anything to do with it. I just wanted to make sure we could survive. So a very deep experience of feeling marginalized and at risk. And we know the pattern. I know the pattern from the families in our school and the children of our school, how much you shut down and you're filled with fear. And if you don't feel safe to live, you don't feel safe to learn. So I felt very much and acted as somebody who couldn't learn because I was so frozen in fear. And then I came to the Waldorf school, and I met on the first day, it was the Empfangs, it was a conversation with 2 teachers and my parents and us kids at the Tübingen Waldorf School, and the person who became my class teacher, Hannah Lindenberg, was the person who led that conversation. And I remember to that day, even though I was only 9, that then in very broken Dutch, she said to me, and you belong for me. You go with me, because it so happened she was the class teacher of third grade, and I was going to be a third grade person, a third grade student. So it is as though I remember the day now. I can feel that moment where she said that, and you go with me. And already then, deep in my heart, I thought, this must be a good German, because she is being so nice to me. I'm sure she was very, very brave in the war. And moreover, there was also Mr. Labude, our music teacher, was also there. He was another good German, because he was also so kind to my brother, both my brothers, as was Mr. Stahlkopf. So I quickly started to feel this is all good Germans, and we are going to, I think, maybe be okay. So that was 1966, and then I became a part of the school. It was such a relief to me that I didn't have to copy things from the board, and I wasn't judged too much on my horrible spelling and my very poor reading. I was actually able to start imagining and dream in singing and in theater and in watercolor painting, and in spending a lot of time drawing the main lesson book pages, which was absolutely my joy, to have the nice Stockmeyer crayons and really make every main lesson cover book beautiful. So I really was very much nurtured in all that the Waldorf school enveloped me of, and that allowed me to start feeling community, not just community with my classmates and with my teacher, but also community with the world, as I was able to start feeling that there are traditions and cultures, and my culture had a room too, and that the different languages all had a home, and that we all were part of a global community and embedded in a deep nature that had rhythms and cycles and a future where we all come and we go and we build towards a better tomorrow. It instilled hope. I then graduated when I did my abitur for the 13th grade, and I did what many of us do, which is, well, that was nice. And the Waldorf teachers are a little bit funny, really do this Waldorf voodoo on Thursdays, but then I got a good education, and I really love my teachers, and I love my classmates, with whom, by the way, I'm still very much in contact. And then a little bit, I kicked the dust off my heels to go into the big wide world. It was only in my early 30s that I actually became very sick. I have MS, so I was sick for a year because I was so affected by MS, and had time to think about what I really wanted to do. And I thought, I really want to be a Waldorf teacher and see if I, with others, can do more, especially in communities that are more serving people like me who feel vulnerable and marginalized. And that's when I started thinking about coming to America and working in America, possibly in New York City or Oakland. But I also wanted to better understand, why was this such an amazing tradition? Why had that affected me and others so much? So I wanted to start to interview my good German teachers about how they had been in the war, and how they had more detail about the courageousness of the Waldorf teachers, the Waldorf movement under National Socialism. So I started to do a little project, and I wanted to start with my teacher and her friend. And so I said to Hannah Lindenberg, I was honored that then I could go from last name to first name, which is not a huge Rubicon in the German tradition at that time. I was able to call her by her first name, and would she sit with me and tell me about her experiences in the war. And her friends sat with me, who is a class mother. And I had my little notebook. I was now 30. I had a notebook, I had a pen, and I was going to learn and document, because at the time also, you must remember, the story was out that the Waldorf schools had been so brave. They had been so brave, they'd been closed by Hitler. And now I was just going to hear the details. So I remember the day. It was it was a sun-drenched in her beautiful, humble, beautiful living room, a beautiful bouquet of flowers from the garden. In the middle, a nice freshly starched tablecloth, some of the favorite cake that she so beautifully always baked, nice cups with simple but nice cups for the coffee, and a candle. So I said, nothing but good can come of this. So I sat with my notebook and my pen, and I said, just tell me what you did in the war. I know we have little time and there's so much to tell, but just tell me a few stories about how you were brave. Or I might not have said how you're brave, but tell me a few stories. And there was some silence, and I heard Hannah clearing her throat and her friend, Berthild, adjusting her position in the beautiful chair. And I said, well, don't feel like you have to tell me everything, but maybe just one thing, like, did you hide somebody? Can you tell stories about maybe taking food off of the rations and hiding it to give it to those who were in hiding? Or maybe a time when you went out and the Gestapo came and said, where did they go? And you pointed, they went that away, but in fact they went that away, so that you could help bring justice and help make somebody be able to escape from threat and come closer to safety. Just a few stories. There was a pause, and then finally, Hannah said, Ida, there are no stories. Ida, there are no stories. This was such a hard time. We were so in the grip of our internal crisis. Dr. Steiner had died not too long ago. The whole question was, who was the true successor? There was such tension between followers of Ita Wegmann and Maria von Steiner that held us in the grip. We could not pay attention to politics. And when we thought about politics, at least I have to say, I was kind of happy somebody would come along who would bring order into the streets. It was crazy out there. There were no stories. We were all in the grip of our internal drama. I have nothing to tell you. As I share this, I still feel what I felt then. It was a moment where I wanted to just tear that white tablecloth off the little table, allow that pretty vase to go flying. I was enraged. I had so trusted. I had believed that she, that they, that all of them were good Germans. And now I hear you were just sidestanders. You were not doing anything, or worse yet, not acting is being complicit. We know that. We know that also about racism. Non-action is complicitness. I wept. And finally, Hannah said, sorry, you can rage all you want. Du kannst toben, wie du willst. But you know your task. Du weißt deine Aufgabe. I said, what do you mean? Mach's besser. Do it better. Do it better. I share this to say that we are not in a legacy of saints. We are not wandering immaculate into the Holy Lands. We are all humans. Dr. Steiner was human. The founding faculty were human. My beloved teacher was human. My beloved teachers were human. And our task is to know macht's besser, do it better, harness the tools, harness the richness of everything that is bequeathed to us. We have these tools to use. It is our task to use them. And using them may not be imitation. It may not be replication. It may not be redo. It has to be renew. It has to be research. It has to be inquiry. For the tasks of tomorrow, Waldorf education is now at the end of its first 100 years, and it has just begun. And it has just begun fulfilling its task. And we've been a little bit slow on the uptake. We've allowed ourselves to gentrify. We've allowed ourselves to bleach. We've allowed ourselves to start talking insider and outsider. We've allowed ourselves to be as distracted as that generation of Germans in Waldorf schools that were so busy with Ida Wegmann and Maria von Steiner that they did not pay attention to the rise of socialism, National Socialism. We may not repeat that. Wir müssen weltmännisch sein. We have to be people of the world. We have to read our papers. We have to be active. We need to be involved, outward looking, to affect the world, not just our in-group, to continue to build membership, to continue to deconstruct institutional inequity. And right now, the inequity that is most forming and most formative is racial inequity. So if we do not lead for equity, for dismantling institutional racism, we miss an opportunity, and that's not just a loss for Waldorf education. That, I propose, is a loss for the world. So finally, in this spirit of macht's besser, I then went to America to work very hard with others to build what the country's first intercultural Waldorf school. This is not perfect. This is not immaculate. We have worked very hard. Even now, I am here. The children are at school, and I will be there in an hour to make sure that I can make my contributions. Everybody's working hard so that they cover for me right now. It is morning. But what I want to propose is that what we see here, and we'll watch a visit for a minute, a little video, is an effort to go back to the original intent, that we include the children that mirror the demographic of the children of the Waldorf Astoria cigarette factory, and the owners, because it was one of the most diverse schools in California, not just and it is the effort macht's besser, that we continue to build on not just the successes, but also the shortcomings, the failures to act, the missed opportunities, and really harness the charge, our commitment as Waldorf educations to the broader community that we call our beloved community of the world. Next slide, please. Oh, this is the opening verse that we always begin with in 5 languages, and it is actually a verse that was brought by it is the first school in English language the first school that was English speaking, and it is the great Waldorf educator Cecil Harwood. This is an ancient verse, and we still are looking for where the origin might be, but it is one that Cecil Harwood brought as the school verse then in 1926, and we have kept that, and we say it every morning in at least 4 languages. Next slide, please. These are our 4 languages. Our demographic, as I say, we're among the most diverse in Oakland and in California. Next slide, please. We are very proud that we are a full-service community school, that we're deeply networked with other community partners so that we have a whole day together, and we also provide for our families everything from food pantry to citizen information, as well as immigration clinics, as well as health clinics. We now have a COVID vaccine truck coming, and we do all school all year. That we also do summer school and work with higher education. We work deeply with Mills. We work with Cal State Teach, so that we're all building together to serve our children and continue to become a model, because our goal is systems change. It's not just one school. Next slide, please. Come visit our school now.
I can hear my heart beat, beating to the rhythm of the freedom drum, beating to the rhythm of the freedom drum. When I say yes to the beat in you, I can see a light shine through.
Before I had kids, I've always thought about, okay, what do I want for my kids when I do have kids?
When Olivia first started at this school, I was so excited.
I won't say I was skeptical as much as I definitely wanted to really look into it.
Well, I'm not gonna say it's hard. I mean, it is hard as you like keep moving up.
Raise your hand if there was a page that was challenging or that you had a question on.
Me encanta ver el empeño que tienen en que Víctor aprenda.
Good morning, community scholars! Good morning, Principal Princeton!
We have something that feels different here. And it's more than the curtains. It's more than the paintings. It's relationships. It's the fact that when you're here, kids know that they're safe and they're loved first.
We have an amazing faculty and staff that, in the midst of difficulties and impediments, really see the power of their children that they're working with and serving.
It's not just a sit down and learn school. It's a what is best for you school.
In this day and age, focusing on just academics or focusing just on sports happens at a lot of other institutions. But at community school, it's focused on the whole child. And I think then we're prepared to send our children out into the world.
The value for the student is that they feel a value within themselves. They feel more confident within their own skills. They feel comfortable advocating for themselves. They feel comfortable when they make mistakes to talk to their peers about support, not just adults. They are able to ask for help when they need it.
They take care of self. Take care of self. They take care of others. Take care of others. They take care of space.
Everybody's welcomed here. I mean, it doesn't matter like who you are and what you are.
I have 3 boys, and they are half Filipino, half white, and it's beautiful to be part of a school that is a mixed culture.
Children from very different socioeconomic stratas, children from various different ethnic and racial groupings, and children who are exploring their orientation feel at home, welcome, and empowered at our school.
It's really a deep sense, not only that I matter, that I lead, that I can lead with others, and that I can lead with others not just to fit in or to meet goals that have been set, but to define new goals, to open new horizons. And that's really what we look forward to for our children.
We have a personal responsibility to co-construct a community that is safe, that is healthy, that is kind, that is loving, that is compassionate, that is empathetic, is a critical piece of what we're doing in East Oakland, in the San Antonio community and neighborhood that has embraced us as a school.
Oh, thank you for the love. How's your check in with you, make sure that you're okay, okay?
What I see happening now is children who are brought up in this Waldorf-like principle, they're gonna be the ones to totally flip it upside down. If you don't have enough diversity, if you don't have enough open-mindedness, then it's gonna be a lot more difficult for you in the next wave of consciousness that these children are bringing forth. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
He will read, he will write, he will make art. he will be able to do those things. And I think that CSCE is a brilliant choice for folks who want to be invested in a multicultural world.
The goal for our school is to not just to survive and have a child survive their TK8 journey in education, but to thrive, not only for themselves, but for the collective good. And I'm so thankful and so honored and so privileged to be a part of it. So I'm ready every day because the fierce urgency is now.
Yes, so imagine that you paid attention. I think and hopefully is also a teaser to please do, as Joost said, and do come visit yourself. But it gives us a closing moment to reflect how important it is to think in terms of relationship. If it's about deconstructing institutional barriers, that the first place to start is building relationship. We say it's relationship of head, heart, and hand. It's relationship of self and other in the class. It is relationship of self and other in the school, in the community, and in the globe. And in our mornings, our statement is always to take care of self, take care of others, and to take care of spaces as head, heart, and hand. Next slide, please. And in our opening circles, we talked about how now the research is showing how important that it also be ritualized across religions to bring people together. We celebrate that every morning. Our Harvest Festival next week, we wish you could all be there. Our Winter Spiral Fest, Lunar New Year, Holi. We have also a day to honor the birthday of the Venerable Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, and the oratorical feast, which comes so much out of the deep roots of African American culture, and Dia de los Niños, and Holi, that we are constantly working to celebrate together from the many different cultures and rituals that are sacred in our global faith traditions. Next slide, please. And last, I began to share with you, we had a hard time getting approved because in America, in charters, you need to get approval from a district or a county, and they first thought that we were just white, wealthy, and weird, and that we would actually not serve our children well, that we would come and go just building. They thought I would come and go and just have it on my resume to say, look at how great I started a school, and leave as so many have left, and then leave the community more in disarray, more unsettled, more dashed hopes, more dashed trust. But we are now in our 14th year, and we're very proud that even by the metrics of the land, which are academic performance, our children are outperforming, and we are serving the most vulnerable. We have 92% are in poverty, 62% have a language other than English, and 17% are identified in need of special education services. And of course, as a Waldorf school, we are full inclusion, and we are outperforming the district, and we are outperforming for our most vulnerable. Our African American students speak about dismantling institutional racism. Our African American students outperformed in the whole city, both the district and the charter schools. The charters are these alternative schools, as well as the district, and district is Oberschulamt, the traditional public schools. So our children with beanbags and watercolor and movement and theater academically outperformed our African American, our Latinx, who are also an underserved group, our Latino, as well as our children with special needs, our IEP students, and our English learners. So we have such an inkling of hope of how our Waldorf strategies can do so much, not just in terms of the depth of love and relationship, but also in the hard measures of academic prowess, of who will gain access to the institutions of higher learning, to dismantle those institutional racist markers of those children who are of color and are non-English learners being underrepresented. Next slide, please. And I have some bragging rights of that we've gotten a lot of attention, both locally and nationally and globally. You will get a copy of the PowerPoint. Next and final slide, please. And every morning and every evening, we always start with a ritual that we've learned from our partners who are also a founding member in the United States of Notfallpädagogik von Freunde der Erziehungskunst, emergency and trauma pedagogy, headquartered in Friends of Waldorf Education in Karlsruhe, Germany, affiliated with the Parzival School. And every morning we start with our hands, and we had more time, we would do it together. Under me the earth, our hands down, over me the sky, and then crossing ourselves. Here am I. We say it in all our languages, and once in closing, we say it without words. And so I close now. I thank you for your attention. I want to make sure that the questions that we said we would address, we will address, and then open it for deeper conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ida. I think we are very much moved by your personal story and of what you have done with that wonderful school. Thank you so much, Ida. And there are a couple of questions, and you already addressed some of them. There's another by Joy de Berker, and you addressed already the question of Kevin. Maybe Joy de Berker, can you put your question and then Ida can go into it?
Yeah, and I want to make sure I did really address Kevin's, but thank you if it was addressed. If Kevin needs more detail, we should make sure to honor.
I think she's not there, Joy de Berker.
I'm here.
Oh yes, okay, great.
Okay, sorry. I can't quite remember my first question, but my second one was to do with, I've worked with early years all my life in kindergarten, parent and child, and no little child, no little baby is born prejudiced. It comes with the environment and the parents predominantly. It's attitudes, and it may not be racial, but it will be, you know what I mean anyway. And it's, I was intrigued and have not stopped thinking about Christophe last week said that it's not the task of teachers to educate the parents. And I really don't agree with that. And I think that it does start really in the home, and we need to work with the parents, because often we say things, do things which parents do unconsciously, because that's how they were brought up. It comes up when they have a child, when they have a baby, the imprint of how they were brought up then repeats itself. And we know that with abuse, the patterns begin again. We know that in many ways. So I'm interested in, at your school, how you address that. The working with parents from parent and child groups really early on, so that you can really have this more egalitarian approach. And I too come from a Jewish background. My mother was a Holocaust survivor, so yeah, lost lots of relatives. So it does bring it home to you how fortunate some of us are to still be here and to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I would rephrase it. It is not the task of the parent, the teacher, to educate the parent. it is the task of the parent to educate the teacher. We have found how incredibly important it is for us to humbly listen, especially right now where Waldorf schools, Waldorf educators are disproportionately middle or higher wealth, and we are serving families who have endured all kinds of discrimination and hardships and institutional and immediate inequities, that we are really listeners and learners first. So we actually start with what we call one-to-ones, where we hear from parents and they hear from us, where we get to know each other to build relationship. We will wait a long time before we come out thinking we have something to tell them, because we know first that they have everything to tell us. This is a school that was really built because the family said Waldorf is, Oakland is ready for Waldorf, and they have really been the ones fighting for the school, and they're the ones who teach us. We're having a parent meeting tomorrow, what they most need, and we learn together. So I think it's very important to know, and I don't know the details of your parent community, but how much it's important for us to be listeners and learners before we start to think that we can tell them. And I think that builds the bridge.
Can I just,
yes, yes.
I just want to say, I don't mean educating in the sense of teacher telling someone what to do. It's just creating the space to listen to each other. That is an educational situation. That's exactly what I mean. It's not about standing at a board and telling somebody what to do. That's not a Waldorf approach anyway. So I absolutely.
Joy, there are a couple of other questions. Maybe we just answer that, Ida, and then we can continue.
Yes, we agree. The parent evenings are a huge, wonderful feature, also an innovation of Waldorf education. Agreed.
Okay, then there has been this question by Kevin. You already read it out loud. It's getting a bit, the question if it's already a left-wing concept, speaking about racism.
Oh, it is not a left-wing concept. It is a fact of, if we look at the data, we see the disparities. So it is, I think it's a very neutral matter of fact to see that there are the huge inequities, and we can together think about how to solve it. It is not only marginalized topic.
Oh, Kevin, you talk yourself. Okay.
Yes, I absolutely understand that. My concern is, in fact, that it has become polarized in that way. You know, the right wing don't believe in systemic. I mean, I'm caricaturing it, of course, but the right wing doesn't believe in institutional racism. That's something for the left, and it becomes a tussle of that sort. How can we work in such a way that avoids that? Because even mentioning something like the issues of systemic racism immediately tends to put people into a certain bracket that then distorts the question along those polarized lines.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I think that is such a key piece of our work right now. You're absolutely right that tragically, much like health, things have become polarized. You're one political side or the other. If you are really trying to come together to address a piece of well-being for us all. So how to overcome that, how to bridge those gaps, that's the task. There's no easy answer, but I'm joining you in the battle. I think we should all join in that this is common. This is not about one side or the other.
Okay. So there has been another question already put by Manuela Silveira. I think she's from Brazil. And I think you already addressed that question in your talk, but maybe you can go into it. It's about the question. So there are many Christian celebrations and festivities within Waldorf schools. And how do you deal with other cultures? Is it, are all the festivities centered on Christian traditions, or how do you deal with that? But you addressed that already. maybe I think if is it okay like that, Manuela, or is there another question connected to it?
No, I think you understood. I'm sorry, my kids are around me, so.
It's nice to hear.
Yes, but I think it was the question about how to integrate or to listen what the teacher thinks about this integration of our cultural manifestations and celebrations and those proposed by Christian, actually Christian-based. I don't know if I if I was accurate. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I think if I may just share one thing that we just started doing, and it has tremendous effect, is at the beginning, we were talking about the parent-teacher conferences. At the beginning of the year, in June and July, we ask, what are the big celebrations in your tradition? And we make sure those are the ones we celebrate, because then the parents come and we sing the songs and we tell the stories, and that's what we bring into our curriculum. And it has been wonderful and a real learning for us all, and everybody is so proud.
There's another quite provoking question, or maybe very sharp question by Patricia. So you're a white person and you're speaking about racism, and of course, if you look into the Waldorf world, you know, as it is said by your colleague, it's white, weird, and rich. So it's also a question of the Waldorf world to dismantle racism and institutional racism. Maybe you can speak about that.
First of all, I was the one who coined it. She quoted it, which I'm very happy she did. And it was a wonderful alliteration, because we found that so much in trying to get approval, that was the feedback we got. We're white, wealthy, and weird. It has to start at home. There's no question. That's, I think, what we're dealing with now. That's why this is a topic I said we have to talk about in this seminar. And we need to all go forth and have this conversation. If we don't do it at home, we don't have any valence going out.
So, next question. Just a moment, I have to scroll through the chat right now. Sorry for that. If you see something yourself, just take it out, Ida.
The issue is racism. How would you approach this case? Yeah, that Petra Drema asks how to approach the case when schools are not diverse, how to become more diverse, which is actually very hard. We were told when we started, you're always as diverse as you start, which is why we worked so hard with families to have 180 different perspectives and races and income levels and languages. That is actually that is not an easy piece. And there's no easy answers. I would say that that's a learning journey. Very important is to build allydom, to build relationships. Where are you? Where are the communities that you would like to be community of? It's not that you want them to be your community, you want to be part of their community. Where do you need to go to meet with the trusted leaders? Share humbly why you want their time. They're very busy. Hear what's most concerned to them when they think about the education of the children in their community. Listen with big ears and see where is there an intersection point, and say, well, given that this is what you say, and most leaders want the same, that the children grow strong and safe and self-confident as leaders with others to build a better community, then start talking about, is there maybe a possibility that we could talk together, and we could visit an event of yours, and then eventually would you come to our school? So it's needing to start by giving, by receiving from those who you would like to join with, and then think it's time for us to give. We need to start as learners.
There has been a question by Jenan Dro. How do we as a community address the fact that Waldorf education is not financially available to most children?
Start public Waldorf schools. It's different in different countries. The funding structure is so different in different countries, but find ways to find what is possible that mirrors public education. I don't know what country you're in, and I want to be respectful that it is a very separate question in each country.
Then there's a question with the teachers, with the team. How do you address topics like that? By Elena Hansen. Do you do team teaching, or do you do lectures for your team, or have talks about that topic? How is your? I think there's a special situation with your team at Oakland Waldorf School too. Maybe you can speak about that, Ida.
Yeah, the question about dismantling institutional racism.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's something we start with. We actually, a book that I would recommend all of you reading is by Zaretta Hammond. I will put it in the chat, about multilingual language learners and reading, but it's really thinking about, and we're actually in the book, I'm very proud, and she's really taken us as an example, but we do common readings, we do common discussion, we also do biography work together, so that we are constantly leading with that our task is to dismantle institutional racism. It's actually a verse after Steiner, receive the child in reverence. We have a beautiful quote, commitment to that work, because we see it's so in line and true to Steiner. There's much more to be said, and it's steady work.
There's been a question by Nisha, Arts Wellbeing Online. Can you put it maybe on speaker? Are you there, Nisha?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I thanks for your talk, Ida. I'm actually British Indian, and I work in a Waldorf school as a transpersonal arts counselor. I personally have had experiences of the Christ being through pictures, and I'm torn on seeing in the schools that some of the more esoteric books are being taken away, and that some of the Christ language is being called dogma. So I wasn't sure how to handle that in the schools where I would be working. And I meet parents, I meet teachers, I meet children. Yeah, and it's worrying me. But if it's a true experience, then, and I happen to be Indian, so it's not like I chose to be Christian, it found me. So then I wasn't sure how to resolve that in the racism side of things, because it seems to be labeled as something that's white privilege or male patriarchy or Christian dogma, when there seems to me that there has to be a transformation work inside ourselves to really know what Christianity is or was before it was hardened. But I don't know how to resolve it. I wondered if you had any thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think if Christianity found me, what is the faith tradition or non-faith tradition that may be found in another person, and how do we need to shape the space together so that that person too would feel welcome in this space? Somebody else might not be on a trajectory to have Christianity as their faith tradition, but another. So it's maybe not taking down one image, but what are the other images? What are the other festivals? What are the other rituals to add so that we know it's not exclusionary?
Okay, thank you.
There's another question, maybe the last one, because we have reached our time limit, but it's a quite, it brings us into a predicament, I think. It's from Claramba Ibarola. How to deal with children who are influenced with racism, for example, from the parents or surroundings, and show it in the school or kindergarten?
Right. Thank you for that, and which is everybody, everything. I mean, we are all racist, and we know that we are all influenced by our parents and our surrounding to that event. So that's the 24/7 work. And it's starting with ourselves, but then, of course, also working with our families and working in the service of our children. I do want to say that we always think we have to start with ourselves first. This is not other first, it's ourselves, and then we need to join with our families and learn from our families and with our families how to build an inclusive community. It's not a shorthand, but it is it's the work.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ida. That was a very special gift you brought us today. And it was wonderful to listen to you. I have put your email address in the chat. So if there's someone would like to write you an email, it's possible. And I would like to ask Katarina or Laura to load again the link for the participating certificate. And yes, I close our session for today. And next Tuesday, it's me. I speak about the development of feeling within Waldorf pedagogy. And I would like to address that topic of feeling. I wish you a wonderful day, Ida, with your children at school. You're at the school right now, and they are waiting for you already. And a good night for everyone in Europe. And yes, and I'm looking forward to see you again next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.